The Anasazi have been portrayed as peaceful, happy farmers, with no problems. But you will see the evidence of violence and warfare almost every place you look.
For 150 years, the textbooks called the Anasazi a peaceful farming people who built the most advanced cities in ancient North America and then vanished. Empty stone palaces, 5-story walls, ceremonial chambers full of treasure, abandoned overnight. Nobody could explain it. Now scientists have finally solved it. The bones in the museum drawers have been sequenced, the coprolites have been tested, and what came back is so much darker than a disappearance that researchers tried to suppress it for decades.
The parts of the assemblage that we can identify with certainty that are human head parts have burning on the backs of the heads or on the tops of the heads, but never on the face.
The Anasazi never vanished at all, and what was actually done to them is still hiding in plain sight. The world they built. Chaco Canyon sits in the high desert of northwestern New Mexico, a shallow cut of sandstone about 9 miles long, surrounded by nothing. No river, no fertile valley, no obvious reason, looking at it today, why anyone would build anything there. And yet, between roughly 900 AD and 1150 AD, it became the political, religious, and architectural center of a civilization that stretched across 90,000 square miles, an area larger than Ireland. They built great houses, more than 150 of them, massive stone structures rising up to 5 stories, some with over 600 rooms, in masonry modern builders still find difficult to replicate. The rooms track the sun and moon across decades-long cycles. A spiral petroglyph on Fajada Butte marked the summer solstice to within a matter of minutes. A network of roads, some 30 feet wide, ran in straight lines across the canyon country for hundreds of miles. They climbed cliffs rather than going around them. At the center of every great house sat a kiva, a circular sunken ceremonial chamber. Then, around 1200 AD, it ended. The great houses were abandoned within a few generations. The roads fell silent. The population walked away and left it all standing. For 150 years, the textbooks gave us a tidy answer: a peaceful farming people, democratic, egalitarian, living in harmony with the land, then dispersing for unknown reasons. The bones were saying something else. Nobody had been able to read them yet. What the bones actually said. When ancient DNA finally arrived, it did not gently revise the textbook, it dismantled it. In the 2000s, sequencing reached a level of precision that allowed researchers to extract readable genetic material from skeletons that had been sitting in museum drawers for a century. The first major study targeted Pueblo Bonito, the grandest great house in the canyon. The individuals buried in room 33, one of the most elite crypts in the structure, were related closely through the female line across 9 generations. A matrilineal dynasty, a ruling lineage that had buried its dead in the same chamber for more than 300 years. Reed mats, turquoise by the thousands, conch shell trumpets from the Pacific coast. These were not the graves of equal citizens. These were the tombs of a hereditary elite. The textbooks had described a people without kings. The DNA described a dynasty. If you have ever wondered how a story this big could sit hidden in plain sight for a century and a half, while the descendants of the people in those graves were living 300 miles away the whole time, hit subscribe right now. The next forensic DNA investigation we are tracking drops the moment we publish. But here is what nobody tells you. The dynasty in room 33 was only the first piece. When researchers compared the broader Chacoan profile to surrounding populations, something did not align. The ancestral Puebloans of the wider region shared a clear, consistent signature stretching back thousands of years. But at Chaco itself, particularly among the elite burials, there were additional signals that did not match anything else in the southwest. The signals were coming in from somewhere else entirely. Someone had arrived, and whoever it was had walked directly into the ruling lineage. The trail pointing south. The DNA could tell researchers a population was an outlier and pointed in a particular direction. To confirm the source, they needed more, so they followed the trade goods. Macaw feathers turned up in Chaco. Macaws live in tropical Mexico. Then came the copper bells, Mesoamerican metallurgy, with no roots north of the border. Then came the cacao residue, identified in Chacoan ceramic fragments. Cacao only grows in the lowland tropics, more than 1,000 miles south. Then came the ball court. At Wupatki on the western edge of the Chacoan world, archaeologists uncovered a Mesoamerican ball court of the kind used for ritual games played across central Mexico for 1,000 years. Nothing like it existed elsewhere in the Southwest. Imported wholesale. Then came the colonnade. Inside Chaco itself, at the great house called Chetro Quitl, a row of columns ran along a central wall in the architectural language of Mesoamerican temples. Sometime later, somebody filled the columns in with masonry, as if the signature had become uncomfortable. Then came the teeth. In the ceremonial heart of Pueblo Bonito, researchers found a single filed tooth in an elite grave. The dental modification style was common across Mesoamerica and unknown anywhere in the Southwest, the Great Basin, the Rocky Mountains, or the Great Plains. And yet, there it was, in the mouth of someone buried at the top of Chacoan society. Now, picture them arriving, a small group walking up out of the southern deserts around 900 AD, into a canyon of pit house villages and modest farmers, not refugees. They carry calendars in their heads, building plans in their hands, and a system of belief their hosts have never encountered. Within a few generations, those pit house villages have become great houses 5 stories tall. The astronomy has been recalibrated, the roads have been laid. A ruling dynasty sits in room 33, and this is where it gets worse. What these arrivals brought was not just architecture, it was a religion that required blood. The forensic checklist. For 30 years, Christy Turner stood almost alone against his entire field. His colleagues asked him to stop. Some asked him not to publish. He kept publishing. He had trained as a forensic consultant working homicide cases with American police, and he could read a human bone the way a paramedic reads a wound. The damage on the Chacoan remains was not from burial, not from time, from processing, dismembered, broken, burned, scattered. The fracture patterns matched, with disturbing precision, what Turner saw on the bones of animals butchered for food. He built a checklist. 6 criteria had to be present before he would call an assemblage what he believed it was. Burning on the backs of skulls, but not on the faces. Consistent with a head placed on a fire while the brain was still inside. Anvil abrasion, the scraping pattern left, when defleshed bone is smashed between 2 stones for marrow. Cut marks made by stone tools at the joint endpoints. Pot polish, the fine sheen left on bone fragments stirred inside cooking vessels. Fracture patterns from breaking fresh bone. And the systematic absence of vertebrae, the richest source of marrow in the human body, pulverized in nearly every assemblage. Turner and his colleagues identified nearly 300 individuals across dozens of Chacoan sites whose remains met the full criteria: men, women, children, infants, processed identically to deer and rabbit. Many in the field still refused to call it what Turner was calling it. Processing did not prove consumption, they argued. The gap between butchering a body and eating one was where the debate lived for more than 20 years. Then came Cowboy Wash. The test that closed the gap. In 1997, at a site called Cowboy Wash in southwestern Colorado, excavators found 7 individuals processed according to every one of Turner's 6 criteria. And in the hearth at the center of the community, beside the cooking vessels, they found a coprolite, desiccated human feces, preserved by the dry desert climate, deposited at the scene. The biochemist Richard Marlar took the sample to his laboratory and designed a single protein test. The protein was human myoglobin. Myoglobin exists only in skeletal muscle. It is not present in the intestinal tract of a person who has eaten plants or any other animal. Human myoglobin in human feces means one thing only. One human being has consumed the muscle tissue of another. Marlar ran the test 6 times in triplicate, with every control he could think of. He wanted to be wrong. Every result came back positive. The hypothesis was no longer a hypothesis. It was a biochemical fact, a religion of terror. Once Cowboy Wash was accepted, the broader pattern fell into place. Roughly 1 in 50 skeletal remains from the Chacoan world showed the full forensic signature. 90% of those remains were found in or near Chacoan ceremonial centers. The signature appeared almost exactly when Chaco rose. It vanished almost exactly when Chaco fell. Not the signature of starvation, not warfare, not famine, something organized. In the Valley of Mexico, the religion the arrivals had brought north had been the foundation of social control for 1,000 years. Elite priests consumed the bodies of sacrificed captives. The gods demanded it, the priests administered it, and anyone who resisted would themselves become the next offering. Transplanted to the Southwest, that model required only a small, ruthless elite and a population willing to comply. Think about what that actually means. Imagine you were a farmer in one of the outlying villages. You wake up, you grind corn, you watch your children play at the edge of the maize fields. And once a generation, sometimes more often, you walk past a kiva at the local great house and you see what has been left there. Not buried, not hidden, left. Bone fragments, cooking residue. The remains of a family from the next village over. You know their names, your children played with their children last summer. And you understand, without anybody having to explain it, that compliance is not optional. That is what the forensic record describes. Concentrated catastrophic events. Entire families processed in a single night. A terror campaign requires very few victims to subjugate thousands. The threat does not need to be carried out often. It only needs to be credible. The Pueblo descendant communities, the Hopi and Zuni and Acoma and the Rio Grande Pueblos, have contested this interpretation for decades, and that contestation matters. Cannibalism accusations have been used throughout American history to dehumanize Native peoples. Whatever happened at Chaco happened to their ancestors, not because of them. The evidence supports exactly that framing. A small, foreign-derived elite, a terrorized population, a theocratic system held together by religious violence until it ran out of road. The collapse and the people who never left. Around 1150 AD, the system reached its expiration date. Tree ring analysis shows the Southwest entered a prolonged drought between roughly 1130 and 1180. The agricultural foundation began to fail. The tribute stopped flowing, the coordination broke down, and the cannibalism signature, present for more than 200 years, begins to disappear almost exactly when the drought begins. After 1180, the assemblages essentially stop. Whether the local population finally rose against the priests, or the priests lost their religious authority, or the theocracy simply dissolved, the archaeology cannot say for certain. What it can say is that within a few decades, the great houses were being abandoned. Not destroyed, not burned, abandoned. By 1300, the Four Corners region was effectively empty. This is the moment the textbook narrative settles on. The vanishing, the lost civilization. And this is where the textbook has always been wrong, because the depopulation of Chaco was not a disappearance, it was a migration. The people who survived the system did not vanish into the desert. They moved south and east, following the rivers, down to the Rio Grande, to the Little Colorado, to the mesas where farming was still possible. They carried the knowledge of agriculture and astronomy and masonry that had sustained their ancestors, and they left behind the ceremonial centers of a system that had stopped being worth preserving. For more than 6 centuries, the story of where they went was told only in the oral traditions of their descendants. Traditions the academic world refused to treat as evidence. What ancient DNA has now done is confirm what those oral traditions had been saying all along. The Anasazi did not vanish. Their descendants have been living in plain sight the entire time. A civilization was called lost, while its descendants lived in the same valleys, performed the same ceremonies, and carried in their bodies the exact biological record of the ones who had built the great houses. The oral traditions told the story accurately for 800 years. The archaeologists simply refused to listen. The real mystery of the American Southwest is not what happened to the people who built Chaco Canyon. It is how long it took the rest of us to notice they were still here. If this is the kind of story you want to keep watching get uncovered, the bones the textbooks ignored, the oral traditions the academy dismissed, the truth sitting in museum drawers, stay with us. The next ancient DNA investigation is already in motion, and it will vindicate another set of voices who have been telling the truth all along.